At the end of this season, 7 drivers are believed to be out of contract or potentially have an option on their contract that's on the team side. And so in this video, since we are at the summer break, I am going to talk about every single one of those 7 drivers and basically talk about which of them is most likely to stay at their team, which of them is most likely to switch to another team or potentially leave Formula 1. The driver that undoubtedly stands out on this list is Lewis Hamilton. As I am recording this right now, he still doesn't have a contract for 2024 or beyond, but we have kind of heard over the last kind of few months and even towards the end of last year, these kind of little comments by Toto and Lewis that kind of indicate that the motivation and the desire from Lewis's side is clearly still there to be in F1 for at least I think another 2 or 3 years, and certainly from Toto there is the desire to keep a 7-time world champion. So again, as I'm recording this, they still haven't put pen to paper, but I think Lewis is one of those that undoubtedly will still be at Mercedes. I mean, if he was to announce that something has gone wrong with the negotiations, maybe Lewis has had a change of heart, I'd be stunned if he wasn't on the grid in 2024 and suddenly announced his retirement. I do think that he's one of those drivers where, because of where Mercedes are now, I think that he would feel bad leaving Mercedes almost in a similar or maybe even worse place to where he found them in 2013. I mean, they are a better team fundamentally, but I think Lewis almost feels that responsibility to leave them in a better place than he is now. And ultimately, from what we've heard from Lewis, he clearly has the motivation. He's been dropping little hints there and there. So yeah, this would be a shock, I think, to say the least. I mean, probably even more shocking than when Nico announced his retirement, and definitely more shocking than when Seb announced his retirement last year, because, you know, when Seb did announce that he was going to leave F1, I think it was kind of shocking for the first 2 or 3 seconds when he put out that video, but then it kind of made sense. You know, Seb clearly had nothing left to prove, and I think the motivation was waning just a little bit, but I think it is still there with Lewis. So yeah, I think 99.9% of the time he is going to stay in F1, but it's just about getting those details in the contract to where both Lewis and Toto want them. I'm sure from a commercial standpoint more than anything kind of, you know, to do with longevity or anything like that. And next up, let's move on to the drivers who are under a bit more pressure by their teams to potentially stay where they are, a lot more than Lewis Hamilton, it must be said. First up, let's talk about Zhou Guanyu. Of course, his contract ends towards the end of this year. He has made, I think, really good progress over the last 2 years. He has certainly got closer to Valtteri Bottas. I think last year, Valtteri definitely had, you know, during Zhou's kind of rookie season, Valtteri definitely had, I think, 2 or 3 tenths in his pocket over Zhou in qualifying, but this season it is a lot closer. Now, I think Zhou has been unfortunate in kind of one sense in terms of the Alfa Romeo's kind of performances really varied. I mean, it's kind of been a roller coaster over the last kind of 2 or 1.5 seasons that he's been at the team. I think frustratingly for him, the car was kind of most competitive right at the beginning of his F1 career in the early parts of 2022. And so as he's improved as a driver, and there's no doubt that he has taken a step in 2023, the car just isn't there, unfortunately. But I did actually put both of these 2 drivers in my top 5 worst drivers of 2023. I think that, you know, as much as they are both very good drivers, I think there's more that they can get out of that car, and I think that lineup, as good as it is for the midfield, you know, whether Audi, when they do take the team over, will want to keep these 2 for the long term, I think there's still a very, very long way to go. But in the short term, I do think that if you kind of, you know, if Valtteri is kept on for next year and he does have a contract, then I don't really see the point of moving Zhou. I mean, there is still that commercial aspect of him being a Chinese driver, and next year the Chinese Grand Prix has been confirmed to return to the calendar. And I think, you know, when we talk about drivers, it's not just the performance aspect, there's a very big commercial aspect as well. I mean, if you remember, when Zhou was actually, right before he was officially announced, an Alfa Romeo dealership in China was already basically advertising that Zhou was, you know, going to be the first Chinese Formula 1 driver before his deal was even official. So, you know, make no mistake, these car brands, they try to kind of get every single bit of commercial value out of Formula 1. How that's going to affect, obviously, Alfa Romeo, don't forget, are leaving Sauber at the end of this year as well. So, you know, how does that kind of affect Zhou's future at the team? I think it all, you know, it's all a very kind of interesting scenario, but undoubtedly the most important thing is going to be his performances on the track. The only kind of pressure that he has for his seat, I think, is potentially Teo Porcher, who is a Sauber young driver and currently leading the Formula 2 championship. But when it comes to Formula 2 this year, with 3 kind of rounds to go in 6 races, there is still, I think, 5 drivers who at least have a chance of winning the title. But yeah, Théo Pourchaire is certainly putting himself in an absolute great position to take over from Zhou for next season. So yeah, this Alfa Romeo seat, or Sauber seat, because of course Alfa are leaving Sauber at the end of this year, it is by no means a lock for 2024. Zhou still has a lot of pressure on his shoulders to deliver. I think he needs to have a very strong season, especially if Théo Pourchaire keeps kind of putting that pressure. And if he does win Formula 2, then yeah, that's going to be a huge amount of pressure on Zhou. It's going to be a massive, I think it's going to be a massive decision that Sauber are going to have to make. But yeah, certainly I think for next year, I am not massively confident that Zhou is going to be there. There's going to be that pulling power of Formula 1 to try and keep their only Chinese driver for when the Chinese Grand Prix returns. So yeah, there's going to be other forces at work other than his performance. But yeah, this is definitely one to watch. And next up, I have got the driver that's most recently joined the 2023 grid, but he does have plenty of experience, and that is Daniel Ricciardo. Quite frankly, I think his future is totally up in the air. Obviously, he kind of wants to go for that Red Bull seat. He wants to see Sergio Perez under pressure and potentially, be ousted of that from that team, because I think there is still a very strong connection. There's still a very strong relationship, clearly, between Daniel Ricciardo and Red Bull, with obviously Christian Horner and Helmut Marko there. So yeah, would he be the right fit at AlphaTauri for next year? I'm just not sure. I don't think he's going to be there next year. I don't think he really should be there, because if he can prove, I think all Red Bull are looking for is for him to prove that there is still a bit of that old Ricciardo still there. And I think that they'll learn that throughout the second half of the season. I don't think they need kind of Ricciardo to, consistently be at AlphaTauri and prove it for the next kind of a year and a half. I don't really see the point of him staying there any longer as well. If he beats Yuki Tsunoda, if he proves that kind of the McLaren years were just a little blip, just a little kind of strike on his record, but now he's past it. Now he's kind of got back to the old Ricciardo that we saw in 2019 and 2020. Then I don't really see what else he has to prove and why he has to stay at potentially an AlphaTauri, which might still be at the back of the grid for next year. So he's the one driver who I don't think will probably be there. There's also a very long list of junior drivers who, certainly have to get a chance at some point. You look at the likes of Liam Lawson, who I think is currently maybe just 1 point behind the championship leader in Super Formula out in Japan. Ayumu Iwasa is one of those 5 drivers I was talking about that's still within a chance of winning the Formula 2 championship. And with Red Bull, you've got to keep that conveyor belt running. You've got to keep it going. You've got to, cycle through these juniors. And if they don't work out, you've got to give someone else a chance. That is their philosophy when it comes to AlphaTauri. And as far as Ricciardo, I think it all depends on Sergio Perez as well. Sergio Perez is not on this list because technically he does have a contract for next year, but those Red Bull contracts are not worth the paper they're written on. So Ricciardo is a really interesting one, but if I was to put my money, I don't think he's going to be at AlphaTauri. But again, they might just, they might stick him in there for another season as kind of like a experienced hand, kind of a Pierre Gasly type to, put alongside Yuki Tsunoda if he is still there. But yeah, if Sergio Perez continues to struggle and has a bad end to the season, do not be surprised if there is a very shock and surprising Ricciardo return to Red Bull. And next up, a driver I just mentioned, Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki is another one of those drivers where, to be honest, if Ricciardo does end up staying, if, Red Bull somehow convince him that, you do another season at AlphaTauri. Sergio's got his contract, we know that you're kind of, biting for that seat, but you're not going to get it for 24, but you might get it for 25, so we'll stick you another year in an AlphaTauri. I think Yuki Tsunoda, especially if he gets beaten by Daniel Ricciardo, and how that head-to-head is going to go down in the second half of the season is going to be massive for both of these drivers and both for the future of these drivers, because Yuki, I think, has done a fantastic job in 2023. I think when you look at the uncompetitiveness of the car, I think the amount of times that he's just missed out on the points has been massively frustrating. He is still, I think, only finished a best position of 10th, I think maybe 3 or 4 times. So I think Yuki's actually done a really good job and been actually a little bit unlucky in some races. But certainly, if he gets beaten by Daniel Ricciardo, I actually worry for his Formula 1 future, because Red Bull have another Japanese driver that has that close Honda, relationship in Formula 2 with Ayumu Iwasa. They have Liam Lawson, who's clearly ready to, to step into Formula 1 and make his debut. And that puts Yuki in a bit of a strange spot, because if the team decides that they still want a kind of an experienced driver and they choose Daniel Ricciardo, but in the second seat, they kind of need to start giving other juniors a chance, that leaves Yuki in a bit of a kind of, precarious spot in terms of will he still be there in 2024? So this one, I think, is down totally to his performances. I think it's less kind of other forces at work and, not as much kind of from the commercial value. It's purely, can he beat Ricciardo? Because if he beats Ricciardo over the second half of the season, and obviously after kind of getting beaten by him in Hungary, which was not a great look. He did a really good job to bounce back from that kind of pressure that was already starting to mount by scoring that 1 point in Spa. So Yuki has clearly upped his game. He can handle the pressure, but it's just about will he be able to do it up against Ricciardo over the second half of the season? Because if he does, then he almost becomes kind of the experienced, kind of indispensable, again, almost a Pierre Gasly type of driver where the team needs that experienced rock. I think AlphaTauri / Toro Rosso in their previous guys, they've always worked best with kind of an experienced driver or a driver that's had kind of 2 or 3 years, and then that young rookie, you know, that young, exciting, raw talent that you kind of give a chance to. So, yeah, will Yuki be there next year? I think that totally depends on if he beats Ricciardo or not. Because I could definitely see a scenario where the team says, right, we need one experienced driver, and it's basically between Yuki or Daniel, and the other one is out. So, yeah, I think it's all down to Yuki. Will he still be there in 2024? I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. And next up, I have got Logan Sargent, of course, a rookie in 2023, and so as a rookie, you're always chasing that kind of next contract. You've also, you know, you're always kind of trying to prove that you've got the potential to improve in the following years, but that you can also do a good job in the here and now. Now, in a weird sense, he's obviously under pressure because he's a Formula 1 driver, he's a rookie, he's got to, you know, prove himself on that level. But at the same time, when you look at the environment that he's in, I think Williams have done a massive job and kind of really actively trying to not put pressure on him, both I think inside the team and also in the media as well. I mean, literally the opposite of Helmut Marko and Red Bull when it comes to AlphaTauri. But, you know, at the same time, what is really in Logan Sargent's favor is the fact that Williams and their academy drivers, they do not have a single academy driver that is in Formula 2. All of their academy drivers are in Formula 3, and so there's almost that kind of missing gap. I was talking about that conveyor belt effect where, you know, there's always a young driver ready to step up. There isn't a Williams driver in Formula 2 that's kind of ready to step up. All of them are in Formula 3. So I think Logan, more than likely, he is going to stay at that team. I think the team, you know, they like him. There's no doubt about it. I think definitely James Vowles speaks very highly of Logan and his potential. And I also think that it means a lot for them to have their own junior, you know, a Williams junior driver. Obviously, in the past, they would have just took a Mercedes junior like they did with George Russell, but I think in this brand new Williams era, they kind of want to make it more, you know, less reliant on the top teams and kind of, you know, them pulling strings, and more kind of Williams being their own team. So I think there's also kind of that element as well. I will say on track, I'm going to be honest, I've been a little bit underwhelmed. I mean, he obviously has been whitewashed by Alex Albon in qualifying, and even in the races, Alex has been really clear of Logan. Now, I know Alex Albon is a good driver. I know he's, you know, a tricky teammate because he's been doing such a good job, but I mean, Alex Albon is not Lewis Hamilton. Alex Albon is not Max Verstappen. Alex Albon is not Fernando Alonso. He's a very good driver, but I just think Logan by now should be a little bit closer to Alex, and I just still haven't seen that. Now, again, he's got all of the rest of the season to go. I think this is also something that I haven't actually talked about yet is the timing of these decisions. You know, some teams are going to start wanting to sort their drivers out in September. Some of them can leave it as late as even after the season in December, and I think Williams have that luxury of honestly leaving this decision until literally the 11th hour. So yeah, I think Logan Sargent, he's probably one of the most confident that I do think he's going to be there. There's loads of reasons, you know, Williams liking him and all of the, you know, their obviously academy drivers not being ready as well, as I mentioned. But even if his seat is safe, I want to see him start kind of progressing and scoring some points and pushing Alex definitely a lot more in the second half of the season. Last up, I have actually got 2 drivers, and I'm going to talk about them in combination because they're both teammates, and that is the 2 Haas drivers. Now, from everything that I've read on the official Formula 1 site, I think both K-Mag and also Nico have an option for next year. So on the team side as well, I should say. So even though their contracts are running out, I think the team kind of has, you know, a decision to make in terms of, do they want to keep both? Do they only want to keep one? You know, what do they want to do? So yeah, both of their contracts are running out. I think they're a really interesting combination where, in terms of where Haas are right now, you know, as much as K-Mag has had a bit of a rough season, we know the qualities that K-Mag can have. He's not quite gelling with the car as Haas have kind of developed it in, you know, a direction that they're finding, you know, performance at in the wind tunnel. It's clearly kind of gone a little bit away from K-Mag. It's something that he's talked about. But then on the other side of the garage, Nico Hülkenberg, there is a lot of people from last year who doubted, you know, that decision to stop kind of Mick Schumacher's development, to kind of take him out of the car for 23 and replace him with, you know, a driver that many people thought, you know, why is Nico even being considered? Why is he returning to Formula 1? He's had his career, he's had his chance. And I think a lot of people are getting proven wrong because Nico Hülkenberg has had a fantastic return to Formula One. I think he's having, relatively speaking, and given the performance of, or the imperformance of the car, if that's even a word, I think Nico's had a fantastic season. Kind of the speed that he's shown to, to get into Q3. I think maybe 7 times or something like that. And then the fact that he has scored more points, he's outscoring K-Mag, and he's finding those opportunities because the Haas is a very difficult car. Does that mean that the team considers, to drop K-Mag for next year? I think Nico, we can kind of assume that he is going to be safe. He is going to be there for next year, potentially on maybe a 1-year kind of extension if it is on the team side. But I do also think that despite the struggles with where this team is, I would also keep K-Mag there as well. I think there's a good kind of experienced kind of environment. They have, so much experience in Formula One and a decent amount of speed. And ultimately, even though Nico and K-Mag are not like the best drivers in the world, I think they're just a decent lineup, especially for where Haas are now. We've seen in the past, and we've learned this lesson, and Mick Schumacher has learned this lesson, that Haas is just not a team that is suited for young drivers. It's an independent team with pressure every single day to even survive on the grid without that kind of manufacturer support. And sometimes, especially with Gunther Steiner managing the team, which I've had my kind of questions about Gunther, I think with that kind of style and that kind of management, it's just not suited to a rookie who is going to make mistakes, who is going to feel the pressure. And I think it's much more suited to two, experienced veterans like a K-Mag and a Nico Hülkenberg. There's no doubt that I think K-Mag does need to start upping his performances because, again, that, kind of bottom end of the midfield or bottom end of the grid, it's a tight fight between Williams, Alfa Romeo, Haas, AlphaTauri, and it's one of those where the drivers are going to make the difference. So yeah, I think K-Mag, he's going to feel a bit of pressure, but I think when the team looks at all of the other available options, I don't see someone, just jumping out. Potentially, if Yuki gets kicked out of AlphaTauri, maybe if Zhou gets kicked out of Alfa Romeo, I think those two might try to go, for K-Mag's seat, but other than that kind of long shot, I do kind of see K-Mag. I definitely see Hülkenberg there next year, and I don't really see too much reason why K-Mag won't be there as well, given the form that he showed just a year ago with scoring that pole position, outperforming, Mick Schumacher in 2022. Haas know the quality driver that they have, but it's just about now working with both Nico and also K-Mag as well to find a better package in terms of the car that both of them can get the best out of, and I think that's more important than, replacing a driver for 2024. Well, there you have it. Those are all of the drivers that are out of contract for next season or potentially have an option on the team side, whether they want to keep them or not. Let me know in the comments below about all of the drivers that I've talked about and who you think is most likely to stay at the team, potentially move to another team, or be out of Formula One entirely. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments box below. And if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would be massively appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one.